Hello and welcome to the In the Moment magazine podcast. I'm Sarah Orme and today I'm joined by Laura Wright, who is a sportswoman and soprano and really into mindfulness.
Thank you. The lovely introduction.
So, Laura, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied opera at the Royal College of Music and I'm a classical singer. But I actually started performing at a much younger age, at 15. And I sang in a group of 4 girls called All Angels. And we were really lucky actually to be introduced into the music industry at that young age, but it also came with a lot of pressure, big changes while I was still at school. So I've always been quite good at juggling lots of things. And obviously then later I started singing on my own as a soloist and signed to Universal on my own when I was actually still studying at Royal College of Music, and came away with my degree and kind of continued to perform. And then I sort of developed into my kind of sporting role, as it were. I'd always loved sport when I was growing up, and I really loved the idea of music and sport coming together. I thought it was quite a powerful combination, and it's kind of grown from there, really. So I feel very lucky to be doing the thing I love for such a long time now.
So when did you start making mindfulness a part of your life? So I'm guessing having those two quite high pressure kind of areas of your life must have made you quite stressed.
Absolutely. And I think I wouldn't say this is something that's particular for women. I think it's both for men and women. But when you're at school, I also think this is something that needs to be taught at a younger age. Even just that awareness of what you're capable of, where the barriers are, where to draw the line. And I think one of the first lessons that my mum taught me that was so useful was just simply learning how to say no to things. Yeah. When you're younger, you know, you've got so much energy, you're running around. I was running from concerts to the hockey pitch, back to concerts, then listening to my lessons on a tape recorder or a CD or whatever, and then trying to finish my coursework in the middle of the night. And it just wasn't something that I could, you know, do at 100% all the time. Because of that, I then suffered with alopecia. So some of my hair, quite a lot of my hair fell out when I was about 16. And I think that was a huge warning sign to me that I just couldn't continue in that way. So that's really when I sort of tried to become more aware of what I was kind of capable of. Like I said, you know, where the limits were with things. And I found, obviously, not only just sport and exercise, but then bringing in yoga, bringing in mindfulness, and being able to take a step back and actually say that that was okay. And as I said earlier, you know, learning how to say no to things was probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, because I think there's a tendency for us to sort of, if we're offered the chance to do something, we keep saying yes, even if it gets to the point where it's not actually good for us. Is that something that's affected you?
Yeah, and I think even more so now. So I'm 27 now. So, you know, I've been singing for 12 years. And even now, someone will say to me, even if I don't know them, they'll say, you know, please could you come and sing at our wedding? We love one of your songs and it's really important to us. And they tell you their story and I'm there going, oh my goodness, you know, how can I say no to this? But then actually you've got to, in some ways, be a little bit selfish in thinking about how that will impact your life. And if it's something that actually you'd look back in hindsight and say, did that benefit me hugely, or did it just cause me stress or distraction or frustration? I think those are the things you have to think about when making those decisions. I do a lot of charity work in my spare time as well. So I do, and I'm not the best at this either, about finding that balance. You know, I would not claim to be an expert in any way. And I think I'm still learning what makes me tick and what things I want to give my time to. So I think, yeah, and that's where mindfulness comes in really, because it's something that is free to practice. You know, it's something that you can do anywhere, anytime. I quite often use apps and things like that on my phone before I'm going on stage as well, just to take a moment, get some headspace. And really, I find that so helpful.
Yeah, because it must be quite stressful. Do you get stage fright at all before you go out?
Yeah, I do get nervous, actually. I actually was talking about this earlier today for some random reason, but I was saying that one of the things I learnt a few years ago from a teacher at Royal College was how to sort of create this bubble around you, sort of like a protection bubble, so that when you go out and perform, you feel like you're in your own space, and people can't kind of come into that space. You're projecting onto them. And I think that as a performer, there are a lot of, everyone's different and they have their unique ways of preparing for a performance. But for me, it's about obviously learning the music and what you're doing well, because if you are nervous, there's probably a reason for that. But I think other than that, preparing, as much as you can. It's really, I always have just a quiet moment backstage. I run through how I want the performance to go in my head before going out on stage. And I think that can apply to lots of different jobs, actually. If you were giving a talk, if you were going out to play rugby or cricket or whatever it is, if you were... I'm sure look at the Winter Olympics and how well we did, and I'm sure they will have their different ways of preparing before something. Yeah. But it's the same emotion, I think, that we all go through. It's that adrenaline. You play out scenarios in your mind that are negative, and it's about pushing those aside and trying to sort of welcome the positive side of things. And as I say, it's a lot easier said than done sometimes.
So what sort of apps do you use then to help you concentrate and get calm before you've got a concert? Yeah,
I use Headspace a lot. I use Yoga Anytime as well, just because for me, travelling around, I can be sort of sitting down for so many hours and such a long period of time. It's really nice to be able to sort of do some sort of flow, just to get the body moving again and feel a little bit more mobile, and focus on breathing techniques as well. Because obviously as a singer, a lot of that performing, the moment you get nervous, the breath is the first thing that goes. So all of that kind of flow, and, the Headspace app is great because it just takes you through that breathing in for 8, breathing out for 8. It's that kind of thing where you then realise you're not even thinking about how stressed you are or you're just focusing on something else. And that means that I tend to, I find calm in that and peace.
Do you find music helps you to feel calmer as well? Does that help you to be mindful?
I think yes, but it depends what kind of music. I think as a musician, unfortunately, one of the frustrating things is if you listen to music that is something you perform, you pick it apart. And that's something I do a lot. And if I listen to another soprano, I would listen with a different kind of ear to someone who perhaps isn't a singer. But equally, I love listening to film music, film composers, my favourite thing to listen to, and I think they take you on such a journey. And then I love kind of electronic music and all that, very, very different to what I sing, I think. And that allows me to relax, and it's good. Yeah, I guess otherwise you're just there sort of, you can't turn off your professional side, you just have to... Yeah, it's difficult too. A glass of wine might help. Yeah, I'm sure that would. No, I'm kidding.
So do you find that mindfulness has helped your sporting career as well?
Yeah, I think so. For me, it's funny because the two go hand in hand. So while I'm not performing, going to some sort of fitness class, or as I say, taking that time out at home to do some sort of flow or meditation practice, that for me is the calming side of my singing career. And it happened, the two actually work really well together. And again, I think that's where I kind of mentioned it and touched on it earlier. The idea of finding that balance is so important. Unfortunately, being completely honest, in terms of a singing career, it's very hard to find balance. In fact, anything in creative industries, anyone out there who's listening to this will completely understand when it's like when you're waiting for a bus, there's none, and then 3 come at once. And that's something you have to learn how to deal with that. So I think it's finding that routine with mindfulness and meditation and obviously the things that, the things that you enjoy in your free time, finding a balance and finding a routine with that, so that then when these things come in and out work-wise, you can cope with that. You can cope with the amount of effort and time that's going to take away from you. So, I think it is very difficult in the creative industries to find that work-life balance. Also because a lot of the time for these people as well, like myself, our passion is our job. So our passion is our job, which is our source of income. So it's really hard to define those different things.
Do you find that makes it quite hard to switch off from your work?
Absolutely. And I think that's something I'm still learning. You know, I still really struggle sometimes to be able to take a step back. I'll find myself writing lists in the middle of the night because I need to get that information out of my head so that I have more headspace. And I think that's something I do find really helpful, is purely just writing, even if it's just a constant stream of things that I feel like I want to achieve or things that I feel like I haven't yet achieved. I think if you can have some way of getting those thoughts out of your head, and then allowing yourself that space mentally to then just recuperate and regather, I think that's helpful.
How do you in particular use music to stay mindful?
In terms of music, for me, I think it's kind of is it helpful when you're being mindful? Depends on the situation.
So would you say perhaps try and meditate while you're listening to music, or
I definitely
go off into your own world, perhaps?
I definitely think coming into meditation and coming out of meditation, I think music can be a really, really clever source of calming the mind. But I think, again, you have to choose the right music. So it's about, building playlists, which I talk about all the time. I think it's something I should do more of, and everyone else actually out there, because we all discover music and we all love finding out about new artists and things like that. And I think people should make more playlists that allow us to calm. Basically the best example I can think of is the last album I did was called The Sound of Strength. And we worked with a gentleman called Dr. Karageorgis from Brunel University, and he worked with Di Green on the Olympics. So basically worked on how different music tempos, so the speed of each song, would help him train. So that's where actually we can look at the technical side of music, and we can actually calm the mind by using different tempos. So, for example, if you were doing sprint training on a treadmill, you're not going to have something that's like you're going to want something that's like it's got a faster tempo, so it's going to make you move more. That goes as well into the side of things like a major or a minor key. So a major key is going to sound happier, a minor key is going to sound sadder. So I think it's taking into consideration those things. And I feel like, I don't know if that would necessarily help me, because as I said, being a musician, I tend to look further into those things, but I do think it can help people choosing the right kind of music before you meditate, before if you're practicing mindfulness, having something that has a calming end. It just takes you into that mindfulness, and then trying to bring yourself out of that in a more positive light. I think music can play a really, really pivotal role.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits for it in terms of well-being as well, aren't there? Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a really I find it a very interesting topic.
Okay, so what sort of things would be on your own personal playlist then, if you were making like a calming mix?
Yeah, I think, so I went to see Niels Fromm recently at the Barbican, and I think there's something absolutely incredibly beautiful about his music. It's very repetitive, which I think, again, has that calming sense. It's almost like looking at the snow outside the window right now. It's like whirling around and around and around.
Oh God, I just looked out.
It's like a blizzard.
I wasn't even looking out the window.
I know. But it's kind of that, with his music, there's so much repetition, and he uses the melody in a really powerful way. So it could be the simplest melody, but it moves around and it comes back. So that little kind of story and motif you heard at the start comes back. And that's really interesting, because in your mind, there's this repetition and recognition of the same thing, and that's comforting, I think. So a lot of my music will be very similar. Olafur Arnalds, who's a Icelandic composer, I believe, he actually wrote, you probably know his music from Broadchurch. He wrote the first, so that was how I discovered him, actually. And Niels Fromm is very similar. I also love kind of the Hans Zimmer film music. Things like Interstellar, there's that sort of repetitive movement in the organ or the piano.
So it's like a little refrain that keeps coming back.
Exactly, and I think that's very calming. Ludovico Einaudi, I think, is great for people who want something calming. And it's melodic and it's pleasing to your ear. You know, it's lovely to listen to.
Yeah, I'll have to get you to do a playlist for us.
Yeah, definitely. Would love to do that.
Yeah. So, for everybody listening, we'll have a Spotify playlist by Laura, which you'll be able to tune into, and you can find that on our blog, which is calmmoment.com, and we'll put a link in the show notes for you. So I was going to ask you actually about mental health. So you said that you've been affected by alopecia when you were younger. Are there other times when you've been affected by anxiety and stress and that you've found mindfulness really helpful?
Yeah. As I say, I was talking to my fiance before this, and he was like, just be really honest, Laura. And I think actually it's something I still massively struggle with. I think living in London, I know obviously some of your listeners won't be from London, but living in cities or working in very stressful environments, everyone has a different limit. I think you have to respect that everyone has a different sort of, what's the word? There's a line we all have, isn't there? There's an amount that we can all cope with as people. And I think the thing that saddens me now is that the interaction between people, between us as humans, is, I feel, reduced so much in the past however many years because of how much we use social media, because of how much we rely on it. And I think there's this one side to it where it's an incredible thing to be able to use it. It's given people platforms who otherwise wouldn't have those platforms, and they are incredibly important people that we've been able to hear. Yeah. Equally, though, there's the other side of it where you find yourself, I see people being honest about it. Even on Instagram, someone will say, I've just spent the last 2 hours going down the rabbit hole of Instagram. And I find myself personally coming out of that feeling really negative. Yeah. Feeling very insular, very alone. And I think it's that kind of thing where we need to be better at talking about the negative impacts of social media as well as the positive. We need to be aware that the young minds of the next generation are going to be affected by that. And I do think that there needs to be more, maybe in schools or just in general, in communicating. I think also it's, mindfulness, you don't have to do that alone either. I think there's something where, for example, I always find solace in saying to my other half, can we just sit down and can we just take a moment and can we just spend some time meditating? Okay, we're not thinking about the same thing, but feeling like you're not the only one who needs that space, I think is comforting. Going back to sort of what I said at the beginning, I think if you do work in a stressful environment, it's you've just got to take a step back. You've got to give yourself that time, and you've got to not blame yourself for that, which is really, really hard because things move so fast now. By the time, you find something you're interested in, there's the next thing that everyone's talking about. So I think it's feeling like you're keeping up with the world.
Yeah, it's the fear of missing out, isn't it?
Yeah.
You feel like you've got to keep up with everybody else, particularly on social media. You end up comparing yourself to others, which is so bad.
It's awful. And I do it all the time. And I think I don't have this or I don't have that. And I should be thinking, but I'm so lucky to have this and I'm so lucky to have that. And what am I grateful for, in that space? And it is so hard. And there is no perfect way of doing it. I think that's where you have to concentrate on what works for you. And some people will find, like I've mentioned before, yoga or meditation or boxing or, something really aggressive will help them as well. There's some days where I literally I do a lot of CrossFit. And that for me is solace in that space because you can just let out all that energy, all that frustration. And then you feel like you've kind of had a bit of a detoxifying experience, which I think could be really helpful.
Yeah, and of course exercise has got proven benefits for stress as well. So if you're doing the meditation and the sport, you've really got it covered.
Absolutely, and I think that's where I kind of find the best balance is that I try and train. I try and have my sort of meditation space, and then my work life kind of fits around that, rather than having to fit your meditation and your sport around your work life. And I know it's hard to do that, but I think that's the way around you should look at it.
Okay. Should we talk a bit more now about your sporting career? Yeah. So would you mind giving everybody like a little overview of the kind of sporting stuff that you've done?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I played quite a high level hockey for East of England, and then I moved on to tennis, and I did quite well at tennis, and I kind of never quite got to the point where I have that sole focus in that sport. I was always kind of really close to getting to that professional level. And then as I left school, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the balance of the singing and the sport was kind of...
Did you feel you had to pick one?
Yeah, there was a point where...
Yeah.
And I think for me, I got more joy out of singing. I felt like I gave people more joy through music. And then I basically ended up finding that there was no sport at Royal College of Music. There was a gym across the road we could use from another university, but there were no teams, there was just no outlet for that. And I thought, well, this is crazy. Just because you're a musician doesn't mean that you're automatically not interested in sport. Yeah. It doesn't make sense. So I then basically I tried to start a netball team, which went really badly. But I tried. And then I started playing rugby. I don't know why it was rugby. I'm going to say that I have 3 older brothers. And I think I was a bit determined to show my dad that I could play the big boys sport, as it were. I was inspired by a lot of the women playing rugby at that time, and I think it's testament to how well they've done, the England rugby team. They are, I think the last score for the women against Scotland was 43-8, for example. They're consistent, they're amazing, they're driven, they all have jobs at the same time as playing professional sport. I think that's amazing. I wanted to go and play rugby, and then I stopped playing because I think it was slightly dangerous with the singing, the injuries. And I think ever since then, I've found different ways of replacing that competitive nature.
Yeah, actually, when I was doing a bit of research for this, I saw on your website that you do Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah.
So is that something you're actually trying to get into the Olympics for? Or?
No, I don't think I'm good enough for that. But I do a lot of CrossFit, and CrossFit involves a small amount of gymnastics, Olympic weightlifting, and sort of this HIIT style training format. So I then focused on the weightlifting side just because I really enjoyed it. It also made me slow down because I find quite a lot of fitness classes can be quite intense, quite fast, and your brain is trying to, take in everything they're telling you to do, and you're worried you're doing it wrong, and there's loud music and all this kind of stuff. And weightlifting was quite a nice methodical way of going through something and still exercising.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's like you're being mindful through the sport as well.
Absolutely. I think particularly with something like weightlifting, there's so many different things to think about in one movement. It's so technical that it becomes, as I say, like quite methodical, and that in itself I find quite calming. Yeah. There's less of that fast, intense sort of just go as hard as you can for as long as you can, because sometimes I think you can get lost in that. So yeah, the weightlifting is quite a calming thing in my life.
It sounds like it's almost like a ritual that you do, and that helps you to get in a good mental space.
Well, and also it's controlled aggression, if you like. So it's a really clever way of practicing how to calm yourself, and then how to use the competitiveness and that sort of side of you in one movement, in one kind of space. And I think that's really handy for anything, because say if something goes wrong, how are you going to keep your feelings in check? How are you going to kind of calm yourself down? It's kind of using that as a tool. I know it may not make sense to people who've never done that kind of exercise, but it's definitely something I've learned from it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because of your two kind of different talents, I guess. It just really shows that you can actually find mindfulness in everything, which is brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's you just got to kind of find the tools as to how you do it and what works for you. So it sounds silly, but what's in your toolbox to be mindful is probably different to mine and different to the next person.
I mean, for me, it's crochet. So
is it?
Yeah, very different.
But is that that's calming because of what you achieve through it?
Yeah, I mean, it's using your hands, and you're completely focused in the activity that you're doing. So I do painting as well.
Yeah.
So for me, my mindfulness comes out of creativity, whereas for you, it's obviously coming from other things.
That's really interesting. But that's what I mean. It's kind of everyone has their own little toolbox of what they can call on to help in those situations. I think that's really interesting.
Okay. I guess we probably should talk a bit about what you've got sort of coming up as well.
Oh, yeah.
What are your future plans?
So my future plans, so I've just started a tour with Russell Watson, who's another classical singer. And we're touring throughout the UK until mid to end of April. In that time, I'm also doing the Grand National this year. So I've done that for the last couple of years. And that's a really, really busy, intense 3 days, actually. So I'll be using my Headspace app quite a lot during that time, I think. And then moving on from there, I'm hoping to do my own show at Edinburgh Festival.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, so it's going to be a one-woman show. And obviously there'll be lots more exciting things to come around that and what it's about specifically. But I'm really excited, working with a producer and a screenwriter. I think that's going to be, again, intense period of time for me, but I'm really excited creatively what that's going to bring. And then Invictus in Australia in October. So working again for Prince Harry's wounded veterans and soldiers.
Yeah, so just for people listening, roughly how many people are you going to be performing in front of at that, if it's not going to freak you out?
At Invictus?
Yes.
I don't actually know how to work out. I mean, so for example, the one in Orlando was across America on ESPN and across the UK. So
millions.
Yeah, numbers-wise, I'm not sure exactly, but quite a lot of people. In fact, though, interestingly, which I remember Grant from the Jockey Club told me this just before I was about to sing ahead of the Grand National, that's the most watched sporting event in the world.
Wow, that's amazing. More than football.
That particular race, because it's one day every year, so it's a bit like FA Cup final or something.
It's kind of like Christmas.
Well,
I guess it's only one day a year.
But it's also because people are like, oh, it's that one horse racing race, like maybe I'll put a bet on. They kind of do that even if they're not interested in it. And I remember he told me that just before I was about to sing. And I was like,
that's very nice of him.
Yeah, cheers, Grant. Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's been really interesting. I hope it's made sense, some of what I've said.
Yeah, I'm
helpful
sure.
to some people.
So where can people find you online on social media?
So Instagram, I'm Laura Wright Official, Twitter, The Laura Wright, Facebook, just my name, and my website's laurawright.co.uk.
Yeah, of course. And we'll have a lovely playlist from Laura as well.
Yeah.
So check out calmmoment.com to find that. And we'll be back again with the podcast very soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
We'd just like to interrupt the podcast for a quick service announcement. We've got some very special offers if you'd like to subscribe to the print edition of the magazine. If you subscribe in the UK by direct debit, you can get 5 issues for just £5, which then goes up to £29.49 for every 6 issues, which is an absolute bargain. And you can claim your offer by going to www.buysubscriptions.com/itpod18. So that's ITPOD18, and you can find the link to that in our show notes. We've got some other great offers for overseas listeners as well, so please check out again the link in the show notes and you can find all of the details there.